This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Zehr. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about Part 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi are two guests. One is a longtime guest on Coffee with Kenobi, a great friend of mine and all of yours. He's got his own triumvirate. I don't know what word you would say, but he's got a lot of podcasts. You know him, you love him. Jeff McGee.
Hi, Dan. There's actually four, so I guess it would be a quadrumvirate.
Quadrumvirate, sure. Patent pending on that.
Something or other, yeah. But yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be back. I've just got to plug a little bit. Marvin Dog Media is celebrating 10 years this month. We started in June of 2012. So that's I either I'm doing something right or I just don't know when to quit. One of the two. Probably the latter.
Hey, congratulations, buddy. The podcast airwaves are better because of you, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. Then our other guest host tonight, Brian DeSutter, is a longtime Star Wars fan, a good friend of mine. We actually worked together at the high school where Tom and I work, but this is his first time ever on a podcast. Brian, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me. I'm very honored to be here, so looking forward to it.
Well, we're happy to have you, and you and I and Tom have had many great conversations about Star Wars, Marvel, whatever. So I knew you would be perfect for this. It's going to be great. Jeff, we're going to turn to you first as whenever we review any shows, Star Wars related, or if on our CWK Pro, or if it's Marvel related or whatever. We always give a letter grade and overall thoughts and reactions to the episode. So, Jeff, what is your letter grade and overall reactions to Part 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi?
This one gets an A for me. This of the four episodes we've gotten so far, I think this one is probably my favorite because this one sort of brought together all of the themes and threads that have been being woven through the series thus far, and puts them all on Front Street and at different points in the show. And I just loved it. If I can give it an A+, I'd give it an A+. I don't know if that's a thing, but I'm going to give it an A+. Whatever. Okay, so it's an A+, A+++++, like the teacher in A Christmas Story, Ralphie's Dream.
Very good. Brian, what about you?
I'd give it an A. I think I agree with Jeff so far. This has probably been my favorite episode. Loved finally seeing Ben be more Obi-Wan Kenobi than just Ben. And I believe that it has a lot to do with his love and care for Leia. As we saw earlier in the series, that, the first time he uses the Force, it's to save her life. And now I feel like because she is being threatened, she is lost, so to speak, at the moment, and he has to go and save her. We see the resurgence of his powers, and I just loved seeing that. So.
Okay. Very good. Well, you both mentioned themes. We're going to talk a lot about themes today when talking about Part 4. I would give this one, I've watched it twice today.
Dan's having to think about it, Brian. I think he's gonna lowball us, I think.
No. I would have if I only watched it the one time. I watched this morning. I thought, this is cool. I'd probably give it a B+. But I watched it again, and I was really struck by what a character-driven piece it is. Typically, historically for me, character-driven stuff is what hits me the most. So I'm going to go between an A and an A+. I'm maybe like a 94.68% to be exact. And we're going to talk about why that is. But I will. This was not my favorite one, but they've all been great. Like my favorite one is still Part 3. For a lot of different reasons. But this one I thought was exquisite because of the power of the storytelling, the power of the characterization. And while it may appear on the surface that not a lot happens, I think quite a bit happens. I think we learn about a lot of characters besides just the titular hero himself. So, Jeff, you mentioned some themes that resonate with you. You think to kind of tie all together really nicely in this episode. What's one that you think is probably the most important, and where did you see it come through here?
Well, I think the most important theme that we've seen thus far in the show overall is Obi-Wan's sort of dealing with his PTSD, I think, for lack of a better word for it, and sort of his loss of faith, really. And we saw a lot of that at the very beginning of the episode. We got a flashback to his encounter with Vader in the last episode, and when they dropped him in the back to tank, I love the juxtaposition of him and Vader, both seeing their inner monologue, and we saw him really have to confront his demons through the episode. And he was, Brian mentioned that, seeing Leia in danger sort of kickstarted his force usage, and that he was thrown into it. He was forced to confront it and just start using it again. He was sort of thrown into the deep end for, literally and figuratively. And the fact that he came out of it okay, I think is something we're going to see play out, and we're going to see the benefit from in the next 2 episodes. I think there are 2 more episodes, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I think we'll see a lot of that be dealt with further, and along with that, seeing sort of the damage that the third sister has experienced in her life. And I have a note about that we'll probably get to later on. But
yes.
Seeing her character get fleshed out, and I apologize if you can hear Margot sneezing in the background. That's my dog, one of them. But hearing her background and getting her character fleshed out a bit more, really, and again, Moses Ingram is just killing it in the role. So those two, seeing these two characters sort of coming at the damage in their past from different angles, was really interesting to me.
I think the opening sequence is so critically important to the overall tone of the series, because you see this sort of warped funhouse mirror version of the two characters. In part 3, Obi-Wan is burned by Vader on purpose, whereas in episode 3, I think Obi-Wan wanted to stop Anakin, but he did not set out to immolate him, to set him ablaze. Then in this one, you see, as they're both being lowered, and you see the scuba, the aqua breather, for lack of a better term, used here for Obi-Wan. Instantly, I say to Mason, "Oh my gosh, this is like what Vader goes through all the time." And then they show different comparisons, one hand versus a severed limb, in a robotic places where Anakin is not whole anymore physically, and certainly mentally he's not either. And then seeing Obi-Wan like that, and obviously that was very, very smart storytelling by Deborah Chow. And it really just struck me how you can't help but wonder, is Anakin aware that Obi-Wan is going through that at the moment? Is Obi-Wan aware that Anakin is going through that at the moment? I don't really know. But what I know is that we as an audience, we as consumers of this medium see, okay, they're so different, but at least for this particular thing, they have more in common than they realize. And I'm interested to see how that plays out later. But Brian, what do you think?
I agree. That was the first note I had written down, was just like Jeff said, the juxtaposition of the two, showing the bruising, the burning, the scarring. Yeah. I loved too that they showed, Obi-Wan's hand, and then flashed over to Vader, and like you said, that he's missing that. The other thing that I really liked was the contrast of Vader is kind of reviewing the battle, and he seems calm and composed during his review of the battle, whereas Kenobi, is panicked, and one of you said PTSD, like he is truly having some PTSD flashbacks there, and so just the contrast of the two of them in the back to tank there, just the difference between their two viewpoints and what's going on for them.
And not to mention the fact that Obi-Wan, when he's being healed, he feels suffocated because of as Tala mentions later, you've got some healing to do that's on the inside. And I think it's really on full display there. Jeff, anything else you want to say about that scene before we move on?
No, I think you guys both hit on the image of his arm, and then Vader's handless arm was really shocking to me, because I hadn't processed what I was seeing, and then when all of a sudden the missing hand shows up, the missing limb shows up, like oh, I see what we're doing now, and I got really excited. So yeah, that was it. I'm just slow in the uptake.
Well, I definitely would not say that. Not to your face, anyway. Just kidding.
That's why I'm not on camera.
So, I think another key part from the opening sequence of this is the fact that we see I've heard it several times. I should know because of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. By the way, if you're a Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order fan, this episode is the one for you. Not only do you get to see the Inquisitor's base again, but you see Purge troopers, the security droid. It's pretty much a feast. Have either of you played that game before?
Not a second.
Same. I have not played it at all.
Yeah, well, at Celebration they announced the sequel to it, so I think there's going to be a lot more. And we saw a lot of our Lucasfilm friends on Twitter talking about, hey, if you're a Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order fan, this is a great episode for you, because it ties all the lore in together. But again, speaking of the lore, I think the scenes, and we can just kind of talk about them all together if you want to. It doesn't really matter to me. I think the scenes with the third sister, Reva, and Leia together, I really find really, really fascinating. Brian, let's start with you. Anything you want to say about those two and their scenes together?
Forgive me, I don't know the little girl's name. The actress who plays.
Oh yeah,
Leia.
that's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
She is phenomenal. I have absolutely loved her in this role. Just the sass that she brings to the character, and you can see, exactly like, yeah, this girl totally grows up to be the Carrie Fisher Princess Leia that we know so well, and she fully embodies that role. I loved the line that she said, "Oh, is this a staring contest?"
Had that in my notes.
I like that too.
That was such a great line, and just the sass and everything. I also wrote down like when she
it's Vivian Lyra Blair, by the way. Sorry.
Okay. No. Thank you. She's talking about, okay, I'm not going to tell you about the path, and just the determination that you saw in her face, the look that you saw, and then instantly Reva threatens her, and then the scared and just the shock, and which is totally realistic, because here's this 10-year-old girl who is trying to be tough, but she's a 10-year-old girl, and
right.
And I really liked that, and seeing the two of them play through this whole interaction. And then in the end, just again, the defiance from Leia, like, you will, you are not going to break me. I will never tell you anything.
Are there themes in these sequences, Jeff, that you caught as well?
Well, that's really where I was keying in more on Reva's backstory. I think her character gets a little more fleshed out here, because she, at one point near the end of the episode, she talks about how basically she's remembering how she was treated because of her ability, and how she trusted people and she shouldn't have. And it just reminded me of, when you have a bad experience like that, especially when you're young, it usually causes you to do one of two things. Either you want to subject others to the same treatment you got, or you want to keep others from that treatment. And we see both sides of that with her and with Obi-Wan. She went down one path, and Obi-Wan obviously has gone down another. But Brian was talking about Vivian's poise. Reminded me a lot of Haley Joel Osment from like The Sixth Sense. She's got such poise and such command of the screen. However, I never saw Haley Joel Osment acting like a kid. And the fact that she can switch between that stoic, poised, wise beyond her years, future Senator Leia, and this frightened little girl Leia, just blew my mind. I hope that someday I'm half the actor she is in this episode. It really is phenomenal. And it really, again, informs when in A New Hope, when Vader comes into the holding cell with Leia and he brings in the interrogator droid, she viscerally, it's the first time you see her seem almost afraid, and now we know why, because she's flashing back to being stuck in this torture chamber.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, they're really asking Vivian to go through quite a range of emotions, and I don't know that it really resonated with me until talking about it with the two of you here today. Because she's scared, she's frightened, she's playful. She runs the gamut of human emotions. It's really a masterful performance. I really like Reva's approach here, because I do think, as you mentioned, Jeff, I do think we are informed a lot more through subtle character context clues, what Reva is like, or what the third sister might actually be like. You know, we've got 2 more episodes to find out what that actually might be. But I feel like she wants to find out what's going on. She wants to find out about the past. She wants to find out about who are these people who are aiding and abetting Jedi and helping them to escape. Because as we know, and we learned in Star Wars Rebels, the Empire is hunting down anyone who is Force sensitive, regardless of how old they are. And they don't care. They don't want them to grow up to become Jedi, and they'll do whatever it takes. It's quite gruesome and horrific. So the whole time, at least to me, the dramatic irony of the situation is, I know that Leia is extremely Force sensitive, but Leia doesn't know that Leia is Force sensitive, and I don't know that it shows up at this early in her life. So that's something that's always in the back of my mind when I see these sequences together. But one thing I noticed is Reva is clearly irritated. And at one point, she kind of flexes her hand like she's like making this angry fist kind of.
That's
a thing.
My favorite moment that she's had so far in the series, when she does that.
Yeah, tell us why.
Well, because okay, so I have to preface this. Have you ever seen the film First Man with Ryan Gosling?
No.
Okay, well, it's a great film. Flopped at the box office. He plays Neil Armstrong. There is a scene in that film.
Oh, yes,
where he realizes he's sitting at the dinner table and he realizes he's not going to be home. He's going to be in space. He's not going to be home for this important event for his kid. And Ryan Gosling has to swallow that emotion, because that's what Neil Armstrong was all about. And the way Ryan Gosling does it is so subtle and so real that it just blows my mind. And it's not anything anybody ever talks about. And I saw that same thing happen with Reva, with Moses Ingram in this scene. She wanted to do so much more, and you saw all of her frustration, all of her hate, all of her anger, and again, her respect for this little girl. I think she has a grudging respect for her. You saw it all in that little close of her fist. You saw every single bit of it, and I've not seen a better bit of acting on Disney Plus, with the exception of maybe Oscar Isaac and Moon Knight, than in that scene.
High praise.
Yes.
Very high praise.
And the other thing that I love about it, I was going to mention this earlier, in all of her dealings with Leia, she's not talking to her as if she's a kid. She's talking to her as if she is just another adult.
Mm-hmm.
Which I also thought was interesting and was the way to go.
Well, I like that you mentioned, I think, Brian, maybe, did you mention this, or Jeff? I can't remember, that she doesn't act like a child. She acts like, yeah, that was Jeff, that it's just good professional acting. But I don't feel like I'm watching acting. I don't feel like I'm watching someone playing pretend. I feel like I'm in the context of that story, being roped into this pretty horrific situation. And Leia handles it with, it's so cool we get to talk about Leia, by the way, in news stories. But Leia handles it like such a pro. Brian, you mentioned, she says, are we having some sort of a staring contest? It's hard not to think about Rey multiple times throughout this episode. Both in the scene where Leia is strapped into that torture device and they're going to try to extract information from her. Reminds me of The Force Awakens. But also, and more importantly, when Reva is trying to use the Force to read Leia's mind, and it doesn't work. There's actually a kid's novel about the New Hope. I think it's called the I don't remember the whole thing was The Princess and the Scoundrel, but it's like a first person perspective of A New Hope from the different individual characters' points of view. And there's a one chapter about Leia being interrogated by that droid on the Death Star, and sort of what goes through her mind and how she doesn't give in. So the PTSD thing is quite noteworthy that you mentioned earlier. But I really like the fact that she's able to resist. And Reva is impressed. And Reva doesn't strike me as someone who holds back. She says, you're strong. she respects Leia. And I think, and we'll just talk about it now, I feel like at the end, I think Reva is stalling. I really think in her heart of hearts, I think she would go through with it, but I think she is stalling when it comes to torturing Leia. I think she holds back, and I think it takes her much longer to make it happen. She even gives a lot of extra opportunities for Leia to deliver the information. Leia won't do it, but Reva holds back, I think. What did you catch that too, Brian?
I don't think that I caught on to that. The other thing that I was going to say was I liked how Reva kept telling her, nobody is coming for you. Everybody is dead. You are alone. The only person that can save you is you. And I had written down, I feel like evil always tries to isolate.
Yes.
Evil always tries to say, you are alone. We see it in I just rewatched Attack of the Clones and then Revenge of the Sith. And you can see it in the fall of Anakin. Palpatine isolates him and says, you're not given the praise that you're due and all of these things. And evil always tries to do that. Whereas on the opposite side, good always tries to remind you, you're never alone. Somebody is always there. Hope is always there. And I just really liked how Reva, is encapsulating that the dark side of it and trying to, there is no escape. There is no hope here. You are cut off. And so I think that what you said, Dan, was a very good point. That I do think you're right now that you pointed that out, that, Reva is trying to stall because, she almost hesitates a couple of times on pushing that button.
So. Mm-hmm.
And she could have easily, before the other officer comes in with Tala's distraction, and she could have easily already have plunged the needles into her, which, as you said, is also kind of disturbing. It's one of the things that I've liked and both disliked about the series so far is I'm like, it's dark.
Yes.
Which is not something I expected from a Disney Plus series. I've been taken aback by it. And so I was like, man, are we really about to torture a kid here? And I'm glad we don't get to see that.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. Jeff, did you feel like Reva was hesitating, holding back?
I did, and I was sort of torn as to why. I think part of it is she didn't want to have to, and I think part of it is she might have been afraid that she would kill the kid too easily, and then she wouldn't get any information.
Oh, I have a feeling it's tied into whatever her backstory is.
It probably is.
There's gotta be. I think there's some empathy there. I really do.
And I'm sure that there is, but there's a part of me that just wants her to be that cold-blooded that she was just worried about killing the kid before she got the information. Somehow, because we haven't had just an out-and-out villain in any of these Disney series yet. I guess we have, but I don't know. Obviously, it would be a much more interesting character if it does go the way you're thinking, and I think that probably is how it's going to go. But there's something sort of twisted and perverse about this person just holding back because she's afraid of killing the kid, and she doesn't want to kill the kid just yet.
No, I don't know. I guess time will tell, I just feel like we've gotten some clues, even from the first episode, that while she is evil and nasty, there is, I don't know. I'll hold my theories. I don't want to break my own rules here on Coffee with Kenobi, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we really haven't talked about the main character at all. There's plenty to say about Obi-Wan Kenobi. We need to talk about Tala as well. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back. We have covered Leia, we've covered Reva, and we've talked about sort of the beginning, the juxtaposition of Anakin in his constant back to tank, trying to heal scars that are not going to heal on the outside, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi's scars. But we haven't talked about Obi-Wan Kenobi or Tala in this episode in part 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, Brian, let's start with you. I know you took a lot of great notes. Is there anything about Tala or any particular scenes with Tala that kind of strike you or that make her a much more interesting character to you?
Yeah, I really liked the fact, and it goes back to what I just said about the good and the evil part of she is so willing to just jump in. When they're talking, they're setting up their plan, like, how are we going to attack this base? And um, Obi-Wan says, why aren't there any shields? And somebody was like, because nobody's going to be stupid enough to attack this place. That was a great line. But then Tala's like, basically, and he's like, we'll just take these land speeders. And she's like, I'll do it. There is no hesitation there. And I just think, again, here's the difference between good and evil. Good is, willing to lay it out there. They're willing to sacrifice, put it all on the line. For somebody she doesn't really even know. But she sees that it's important to Ben, and she's like, okay, we got to do this. We have to go save this little girl. And so the willingness she has to just, to go and potentially this is a suicide mission because they know they're going deep into enemy lines. They have really no knowledge of the base that they're about to attack. And she doesn't even really seem to care that, she's just like, okay, we have to do this. And so to me, I really liked that about her character. The emotion, the willingness to lay it out. And then the other scene that that stood out to me for her was when she bluffs her way past the first security checkpoint. And you can see the hesitation, and then it's almost like, okay, I'm going for it. And she just turns on kind of becomes aggressive and is like, who's your supervisor? Do you understand what I'm doing here? And do you understand what classified means? And then just once he finally lets her through, you see that brief look of, oh, thank goodness that worked. And so those two things I just really enjoyed about her.
Tala is a really interesting character. Apparently, and I'm not familiar really with Game of Thrones. So and Jeff, do you watch Game of Thrones? Is that something
I have. It's a much different character. The actress Indira Varna is a remarkable actress with a ton of range, as evidenced by if all you've seen is Game of Thrones and this are two polar opposites. You were talking about her being an interesting character. To me, the way the character is written, it's really nothing I haven't seen before, but it's all down to the performance. The actor in this role, they cast it so well that she imbues her with such presence and with such a backstory that's not ever spoken. That's what makes it all work for me. Not that it's not well written; it's a very well written character. It's just maybe it's because of my experience reading the comics. We've seen characters like this,
Sure.
but everything Brian said was absolutely correct as well. Just the fact that she just kind of hesitates for just a second and then turns it on. It's a remarkable performance.
Tala Durith is her name. Taladurith. There's a Funko Pop that was just revealed for this week's Obi-Wan Wednesdays that Disney sent out. But what I like about her is that she's no nonsense and she's fierce, but she's got a big heart.
There's a softness there.
She's very much like, she's like almost like a James Bond type of character to a degree. And what I mean by that is she kills her enemies and does so fearlessly and just moves on to the next thing without any loss of composure. How is it affecting her on the inside? I don't know. Time will tell on that, hopefully. But I find her interesting, and I think she clearly has incredible respect for Obi-Wan Kenobi, as she says in part 3 when they first meet each other and they're going down the path. But here when she was explaining to the third sister that of course, I'm a spy. I found myself, she's so good at what she's doing. I found myself thinking, well, was she ever really legitimately in the Empire? And then she joined the rebellion, or the burgeoning rebellion. It's not called the rebellion yet, and won't be for a while. Or what? What do we think's going on here?
I feel like she was a plant. Either she was a plant, or it was a situation where she joined the Empire and then became disillusioned, and pretty early on, sort of like Biggs did, if
and
you
I hope
remember the
that's
radio
the
drama. Yeah, I think that's more than likely the case. After I said she was a plant, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. That happens a lot with me. But for a split second, when she said, "Of course I'm a spy," the way she said it so matter of factly, for a split second, I thought, "Wait, is she about to double cross Obi-Wan?" That's how real the performance was. That she, not that it takes a lot to fool me, but she roped me in that moment.
Well, I thought that was cool too, because to me, that's like she can actually tell the truth. Yes, of course I'm a spy, but she's the spy for the good guys, for the side of light. So this is her chance to do it, and she's so good at it then that Reva can't quite make sense of it. But there's no time to, because Obi-Wan is up to a lot of himself. I thought. I think the special effects, naturally, because it's Lucasfilm and ILM, are so good in this series. But the sequence with Obi-Wan swimming down to get inside the base itself, the arrogance of the Empire, too, while they've got a lot of guarding going on, it's still pretty lax. Of course, it wouldn't be Star Wars without somebody easily getting inside a mighty facility. We saw it, of course, famously in A New Hope, all throughout the series Star Wars Rebels. And you see it here too, but I want to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Brian, you mentioned him using the Force here, and we've seen throughout the series, the only time he's really used the Force up to this point was in Part 2 when he rescues Leia, when she falls in between those two buildings. But we start to see a lot more of it throughout the episode. What are some things that jumped out to you about his connection with the Force in Part 4?
The first time he uses it when they're on the spaceship and heading there, and he's, just barely moving and I'm not sure what device that was, but
I'm not sure what it is either.
The little metal
Dongle.
box, and he just, moves it a couple of inches, really. And Tala, is like, "You'll get there," and she's, again, the difference between the light and the dark of, she's encouraging, she is pushing him on to be better, whereas the Inquisitors are constantly vying for position, and they're constantly literally stabbing each other
Yes.
to gain better ranking on the dark side. And so there's that. And then he really uses the Force, I would say, for the first time in battle, when he's hiding and the stormtroopers, and he does the little thing with his fingers, and he kind of points down the hallway and makes the disturbance. And so, I was like, this is the first time we're really seeing him kind of starting to use it in battle. And then, of course, when they're, Leia's truly in danger, and Ben, the wall, the water, and all of a sudden I'm like, holy cow, this is a massive amount of Force that he is using now to not only concentrate on that, but then once they start opening the doors and he starts, wielding his lightsaber at the same time, blocking laser blasts, and still concentrating enough to hold the water at bay, and then unleashing it once they've all, spilled into the hallway, and he can, bring full damage to all the stormtroopers that are there.
I feel like early on, when he can't move that thing, and that's when Tala says to him, your body isn't the only thing that needs to heal. And he says something along, and help me out with the exact line. I normally write it down, but I didn't write this one down. He says something on the lines of, some things are hard to forget. Does that sound right?
I think that's exactly what he said. Yeah. Some things are,
some memories are hard to forget, something like that. Yeah.
And she basically says, well, you care about it. You're going to have to. You're going to have to focus on the present. You're going to have to focus on the people you care about. And I love that. I love that she's like compassionate, but she's like, get over yourself. We got to focus. Come on. And then when he first gets into the fortress itself, he still is using physical force to take out stormtroopers. And then it's very like physically challenging for him to make that noise to distract those stormtroopers to go to the other side of that hallway, which I love. You know, you can't help but think of A New Hope again, and the casual way he just calls them off very, very easily. But he's in a very much different place spiritually and emotionally in A New Hope than he is in this series itself. And even when he first rescues Leia, I think, and Jeff, I want to talk to you about this specifically. The lighting on this series continues to be exquisite, particularly with Obi-Wan's blue lightsaber. But when he ignites it and takes out those stormtroopers, both of those hacks on both of the troopers themselves, I didn't feel like that was the Force. That was some Jedi tactics, but that was just chop and hack and slash. I don't think he was using the Force here. I don't think it's till later in the episode with the lightsabers and the blasters that he used it. But here, I think it's just pure
muscle
physicality.
Memory.
Yeah, muscle memory. But the lighting is exquisite.
Oh, I love that. As soon as the lights all went off, I was like, are we going to see? And you know me, I'm a sucker for you give me one blue light and one red light. And for some reason, that's like kind of a sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
And when you see him ignite it, then he slices one, then he extinguishes it. And the other stormtrooper is just sort of freaking out and everything. I was like, oh, he's gonna predator this thing up, and he did. That's exactly what he did, and it was Obi-Wan as a bad mamma jamma for once was great, and I think you're exactly right. I don't think that was not the Force. That was just him doing what had to be done and remembering his training and his technique.
Yes, but not unlike what General Grievous does with a lightsaber.
Right.
That was my favorite scene in the episode. Was
really?
That? Yeah, and I think it was something somebody said in the last week on the review of 3, where we see that light brings hope, and I felt like actually this time the darkness, when the lights went out, that brought hope, because I was like, oh, I know this is about to go down in a good way for the good guys. And so, and Jeff, like you just said, like when you first see that first flash of the blue lightsaber, and then and the first guy goes down, and then the second stormtrooper is like, oh, there's no way out of this room. And I'm like, he doesn't want to get out of the room. That's what he's not going for that. Like, I'm
not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with me.
Exactly.
Right. Good old Rorschach on him.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, no, that scene was my favorite scene of this particular episode.
It's pretty great. Again, the cinematography and the lighting are wonderful. But then when he gets her out, and I'm always a sucker for this, and this always drives me crazy. When he gets her out, he picks her up and he puts her down, and he holds her hand and says, "You're going to be okay." But they don't give each other a big hug. That always drives me crazy. Come on, give him a hug.
I had no problem with it, because that now is not the time for hugging. Now is the time for getting the H out.
That's true. The heck out. Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's true. Then there's a sequence where he ignites a lightsaber and he's deflecting these blaster bolts. Now you have to be using the Force here, because otherwise you're not going to get that lucky that often. He finally starts deflecting it back and forth. He's a little rusty, which I think is why there becomes a crack in that glass that threatens the water to come in really, really quickly. But Jeff, anything you want to say about that sequence?
Well, I think this is, you guys talked about how he had to expend so much energy in throwing the noise to distract the stormtroopers first. And we see him struggling here. But from that point forward, once he starts deflecting the laser blasts, he doesn't seem to have a whole lot of trouble with it, because he's not thinking. He's just acting on instinct, and he's letting the Force take over. And he's letting the Force flow through him, because he's not thinking about it. He's not in his own head. He doesn't have the yips anymore, to use a baseball term. I guess it's a sports term.
I like
in general.
that. Yeah.
He sort of had the yips about it, and when he doesn't have time to think about it, he can do it. And I thought that was great, because that's exactly how it would happen. You haven't used it for so long, but when you're forced into it, it's just like muscle memory. Force memory, I think, kind of works the same way.
Force memory. I like that. You may have coined something there, my friend. Brian, you anything you want to say about this?
I think Jeff said it well right there. Like, just, once he falls back into it, he's back to, like I think I said earlier, he's no longer Ben in this episode. He is now Obi-Wan again.
Obi-Wan.
And I loved the reemergence of him. And that's why this episode has been my favorite so far, is because I haven't particularly enjoyed the weak Ben. And I'm glad that we've finally gotten to see Obi-Wan Kenobi again.
See, I still don't think we've seen Obi-Wan Kenobi yet. I don't think he's there. I think he's getting closer, but I think the sequence, and I'm going to go on English teacher here, when he's holding back the water from breaking in, he's doing that purposefully because otherwise they will die. They will drown. It's obvious that you have to do that. There's no question. But I also think it's symbolic of his reluctance to change and go through a spiritual rebirth. That water's not going to come through because he's trying to save their lives, but he's also trying to save himself. There's still a lot of guilt there. And the trick psychologically with facing our inner demons is sometimes we don't want to. Sometimes we subconsciously like a little pain in our poetry, and sort of like that devil, where you're just sort of used to that pain. You don't know how to let go of it. You're not sure if you want to because you're so used to living with it, and how will you function without it? When he finally allows it to break through and whisks away the danger, and he has to run through, and there's that beautiful sequence where the door closes, and then through the special effects, it looks like the water is starting to try to seep through again. Even there, like, he's not quite Obi-Wan yet. He hasn't quite fully changed yet. He's not taking command of that room. And I've said this last week. I've said it since the series started. He's not Obi-Wan Kenobi yet until he starts wisecracking. He's not close. He doesn't talk still. He's still trying to find that composure in who he is. He's still resisting that change like that water. But once it pours through, and we know that it's going to, then you're going to see that apotheosis, that complete transformation spiritually into the Obi-Wan Kenobi we know and love.
That's a very good point. I think you're absolutely right, Dan.
You're right. Yeah, we haven't heard the wisecracking, like Spider-Man, always is joking in his fights, and yeah, we haven't heard that yet from him. The other thing I liked at the very end of that scene too was just the stormtroopers kind of floating there in the water. I liked that special effect of.
You want to talk about dark?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And the water's so green and murky, and it's just you typically think of baptism or water or change. It's never green, dirty water. It's usually blue and beautiful and transcendent, and we're not seeing any of that. So I was 94.6. Nah, it's A+. We're bumping it up. We're bumping it up.
We talked him into it, Brian.
There's a lot of great character stuff. I mean, and I kind of had a feeling there was. Again, I'm glad I watched it a second time. But it's excellent. It's an absolute, and this whole series has been a wonderful character piece. And this is why, for some, it's not working. Brian, you had some really wonderful articulate points about why some of that you're looking for to Obi-Wan coming back. I actually like that he's struggled this whole time, because I find Obi-Wan Kenobi more relatable in this series than I have in the 40 plus years of the history of the character. I've always liked Obi-Wan. I've always appreciated him. I've never really cared about him the way I do now. Now he's become one of my favorite Star Wars characters because that vulnerability, that humanity of him. I think it's also why I like The Last Jedi. The more human the characters are, and this is a classic mythological Greek archetype, the more relatable they are to me, the more vulnerable they are as people.
Well, and this is the first time we've had to see him deal with the immediate aftermath of bad things, like at the end of Revenge of the Sith and at the end of Attack of the Clones and things like that. But we've never seen the aftermath for him. This is the first time I feel like we've really seen Obi-Wan, with the exception of that moment I talked about on the podcast stage where he told Padme, "I'm so sorry," and when he told Anakin, "You were my brother." This is the first time we've ever seen him with any real human emotion.
Yeah.
That we can all relate to, because those are both moments that are really heightened emotionally. But this is something that we're seeing sort of the workaday Obi-Wan dealing with the fallout of the choices that he made and the choices that others made that affected him.
100%. I love it. Well, Jeff and Brian, anything you all want to say that we didn't talk about? Anything you wrote down or anything you thought about that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Two things. Snow speeders, not in the snow.
Yay.
That was a lot of fun.
Great.
And I liked seeing O'Shea Jackson Jr. in this. That's Ice Cube's son, for anybody listening who doesn't know.
That's right.
He actually played Ice Cube in Straight Outta Compton.
And he's great. I love him.
He really
in
is.
this.
I hope that we get to see more of him, because he
Great.
really is a good actor. He's very charismatic, and a lot of some nice moments in this episode.
I love that
why
when
he
Tala.
looked
Yeah, so familiar.
I kept thinking, I'm like, why do I know who this guy is, or where have I seen him before? But he looks like Ice. Okay, thank you, Jeff. That's
what I do.
It was awesome. Brian, anything you want to talk about that we missed for the episode?
The one scene for me that did not work in this episode was them walking out with Leia underneath the trench coat, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry,
I
cannot get on board with this. There are 6 legs. You are walking through a super crowded area, and nobody notices the bulge out of the side of his jacket and an extra set of legs and feet. And I was just like, no, I'm sorry. I can suspend, disbelief so far, but I cannot do it. Like that scene there just did not work for me. And so there was that.
It might as well have been 3 kids in a trench coat.
Yeah, stacked on top of each other.
With a Hamburglar.
Yeah. So that one, that just did not do it for me. And then just again, the difference between I liked at the end where we see Vader again, and I will not tolerate mistakes. I will not, you're going to pay for everything here. Again, the difference between the light and the dark. Kenobi has made several mistakes throughout, and people have encouraged him on the light side. Every time somebody makes a mistake on the dark side, it's punishment or literally death. They're paying with their life, and just the difference between those two again is such a stark contrast. And then even though we only met Wade for 15, 20 seconds, the true loss. Everybody is feeling like, hey, we just had this successful mission, but that isn't shown at all. The only thought is we lost Wade.
And that silent reaction by the actress when he asked what happened, and she didn't say a thing. That's again, I always key in on faces and those swallowed emotions, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Now you know what it's like to be a soldier. Tell us.
I guess you're a soldier now.
Yeah.
I wrote that down too. That line. Guess you're soldiers now is great. Yeah. Because they said it earlier on. Anytime they can bring stuff full circle in a movie or in a show, I really like when they call back to that. And they're like, hey, we're not soldiers. And again, and I had written that down too, like shows the difference between, and like you said, Dan, they're not the resistance yet, but they're just normal people. Whereas, the Empire is, I hearken it to almost the British Empire and the American Revolution. I'm a history, taught history for a while. And so, I think about things that way and just the difference between, these are just normal everyday people who are fighting for their homes, their lives. And then this is the big empire that's just, coming in and crushing everything.
Absolutely. The only really crushing thing is there's only 2 episodes left, but we got a good 2 hours of more Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's been a wonderful series. It's been great breaking down part 4 with both of you. Jeff, thank you as always for being back on Coffee with Kenobi. Please let everybody know about Marvin Dog Media, and congratulations again on 10 years, my friend. It's so awesome.
Interestingly enough, Vivian, who plays Leia, her birthday is the same date that the first Marvin Dog Media podcast dropped. June 4th, 2012. Yeah.
How about that?
Which is also my brother's birthday, not 2012. He was born several decades earlier. But no, you can find, if you can't get enough of me talking about Star Wars, Matt Moore and I host Star Wars Splash Page, a comics podcast. We review each week's new Star Wars comics that come out from both Marvel and soon from Dark Horse whenever they start dropping those. And then you can find me on Talking Toys with Taylor and Jeff, talking about toys with my friend Taylor, as you might have guessed by the title. You can find me on the pilot episode talking about television shows. You can find me on the Saturday Morning Supercast talking about cartoons and breakfast cereal. So if you just can't get enough of me, go to marvindogmedia.com and you can find everything there, or you can just look up. If you look up Jeff McGee on, I figured this out. If you look up Jeff McGee on Apple Podcasts, you'll find all of my shows. So there's that. And Brian, I look forward to whatever show you end up launching in the next 3 or 4 months because you're a natural at this.
Amen. Amen. I completely get it. Well, Brian, you were wonderful, buddy. I knew you would be. You did great on your first podcast. I fully expect you to be very common on the airwaves of. But in the meantime, where can people reach out to you if they want to ask you any questions or just say hello?
I guess you can find me on Facebook at Brian DeSutter. I don't have a huge, I'm not like you guys, don't have a huge social media presence. So, I mean, if you want to reach out to me there, you can find me on Facebook and drop me a message there.
So maybe you'll see Brian in the CWK Cafe as well in our Facebook group. I
would love to do that. Yep.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Zehr, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Thank you so much to Brian DeSutter and Jeff McGee for joining me to talk about part 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Only 2 episodes left, but boy, has it been rich and really enriching for me to talk about with each and every one of you. If you are thinking about going somewhere on vacation this summer or in 2022 and beyond, be sure to go to our travel partner at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is our travel partner, and they are wonderful. Becky Mankin and her team can give you a no-cost, no-obligation quote and help you plan your magical vacation on the Galactic Star Cruiser, Galaxy's Edge, the theme parks, the cruise lines, Star Wars Celebration next year in London, and anywhere else, literally anywhere else you want to go for your vacation. Speaking of the Galactic Star Cruiser, don't forget, in the summer of 2023, Coffee with Kenobi and MEI and Mouse Fan Travel are teaming up to take a journey on the Galactic Star Cruiser aboard the Halcyon. Much more on that in the future. Monday nights at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Coffee with Kenobi's Facebook Live, you can give your top 5 moments from Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 4 that we talked about today. The great thing about Facebook Live, though, besides watching it live with us at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi or coffeewithkenobi.com/live, you can get your voice heard on the show instantly, and I can share with everybody who's listening to the audio podcast feed or later watching it on YouTube or on Instagram. Coffee with Kenobi has a really wonderful Facebook group with a lot of amazing people. coffeewithkenobi.com/community. That is where you can find the CWK Cafe and give your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler and drama-free place. Coffee with Kenobi is literally possible because of the members of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to all of you, the podcast, Facebook Live, event coverage, and so much more come to life. Find out how you can help the show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you will receive access to CWK Pour-Over, an exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else. Go to coffeewithkenobi.com/support or coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to St. Jude Children's Hospital. Coffeewithkenobi.com is where you can go for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. You can email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR, on Instagram at DanZehrCWK, and on LinkedIn. Coffee with Kenobi is on social media for Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. You can give the show a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel. Please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And if you love our new Coffee with Kenobi logo, I saw it all over Star Wars Celebration, which was amazing. coffeewithkenobi.com/shop is where you can get a t-shirt, a hoodie, a laptop cover, or so many other things. If you want to start a podcast or a blog, or have one existing and want to expand your brand, danzmedia.com is where you can go to sign up and have me help you take that first step into a larger world. I'm also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. Have a great rest of your week and weekend, everybody. Get your top 5 ready for next Monday night's Coffee with Kenobi CWK Live. We can give your top 5 favorite moments from part 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Until then, may the Force be with you, everybody. And remember, this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.